A massive debate going on at the minute is whether the BBC should be funded by the licence fee. There are a lot of opinions being bounced around at the moment, especially on Twitter, where supporters of defunding have got hashtag defund the BBC trending multiple times. And I made the mistake of looking into that hashtag, and there is so much inaccuracy and hate that it made me want to make this video.
Vision and sound are...
Now, television and news is something I'm very interested in, and as I am doing a degree in film and TV and English Lit, I've had the opportunity to research and learn more about live TV and how the BBC functions. I'm firstly going to explain what the licence fee is and how and why the BBC is funded by it, as there's a little bit of misinformation being spread at the moment. So the licence fee is an annual payment of £153 that every person in the UK who 1. Watches any form of live television, that's not just live BBC programmes, that includes ITV, Channel 4, etc. 2. If you watch live TV on a demand service like iPlayer, 4AD or ITV Hub. And 3. If you watch any BBC programme either live or on the BBC iPlayer, even if they're not live. But BBC programmes that are on Netflix and similar subscription services are fine. The TV licence was introduced in 1946, following the war when it was reintroduced. However, radios also needed licenses since 1907.
Good evening. The headlines tonight, the 2nd of May 1945. Adolf Hitler is dead.
A lot of people believe that the UK is the only country that has a TV licence, especially when it's talked about in America. It's kind of seen as this outlandish concept that the people in the UK have to pay for a TV licence.
A license to watch television?
Yeah.
That's a birthright.
But in fact, there are a lot of other countries that have to pay for a TV licence. So some countries that have a TV licence include Norway, Denmark, Austria, Switzerland, Sweden, Germany, Ireland, France, Japan, Italy, Belgium, and there's so many more. And there are a lot that are much more expensive than the UK as well. And a lot of them don't come with a public service broadcaster. Germany, for example, you also have to pay for a radio, and that's included in your tax, so you don't really have a choice about whether you pay it, whereas in the UK you do. Finland and Iceland have recently abolished their TV licence fee, but they have replaced it with a tax that applies to all adults. So either way, we're going to have to pay for a TV licence of some sorts, whether that's basically a voluntary fee, whether you want to use a TV or not. Otherwise, it's going to be included in tax. Finland has also removed its TV licence fee, but has introduced a public service broadcasting tax. The BBC, or the British Broadcasting Company, now British Broadcasting Corporation, was established in 1922 for radio, and then around 1929 to 1930 it started producing TV. Unlike ITV, for example, BBC is a public service broadcaster and has an ethos that it should 1. Educate, 2. Inform, and then lastly, entertain. With John Reith saying, "I think it will be admitted by all to have exploited so great a scientific invention for the purpose and pursuit of entertainment alone would have been a prostitution of its powers and an insult to the character and intelligence of people." So this means that BBC programmes have to be educational and informative over entertaining. However, this doesn't mean that programmes can't be entertaining. So let's have a look at some of their most recent successes. The Great British Bake Off. First of all, it was a bakery show. People competed in baking cakes, biscuits, really entertaining show. It also contained segments where Mel and Sue would go and talk about the history of different types of food, so it contained the educational part. Now, the Great British Bake Off has moved over to Channel 4, where this segment has now been removed. There, they prioritise entertainment over education. Shows like Sherlock have been based on classic literature.
The name Sherlock Holmes and the address is 221B Baker Street.
And Called the Midwife, it's very educational about life in the 1960s and how healthcare in the UK has advanced. When the BBC was first introduced, they catered to their main audience. And at the time, only rich or middle class people could afford TV, so only they paid for the TV licence. So the early BBC promoted views that were primarily white, conservative, middle class, Christian, and based a lot of their programmes in England, or more specifically London, ignoring Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. As the number of people owning a television grew, the BBC had to grow and change to cater its programmes to a more diverse audience. This introduced the concept of least objectionable programming, the idea that they could produce programs that would be appropriate for everybody and that the majority of the audience would enjoy. This is especially important following the introduction of ITV, or ABC as it was originally called, in 1955, who produced shows that represented the working class, different religions, and had a less conservative attitude that meant they could swear and feature more adult themes. ITV is different from the BBC in the fact that it's independent and not funded by the licence fee, but by advertisements. This meant it did not need to meet as many requirements as the BBC, as BBC programmes had to match its ethos. Due to ITV creating shows that appealed to a greater amount of people and broke the BBC's monopoly on television, the BBC had to adapt to draw in these viewers. Nowadays, the BBC programmes represent a larger amount of the population. This links into impartiality and objectivity, which is a massive part of the ethos of the BBC, particularly when it comes to the news. The idea of impartiality is to produce content that represents and appeals to the majority and minority interests and opinions. This means you can't just promote one opinion, even that if there's a majority, you need to introduce the minority opinions as well. Objectivity is to produce news that is not influenced by feelings or opinions, meaning that they would just state facts. Now, the BBC is not completely impartial. In fact, it is pretty much impossible to be so, as they have to take stances on some things. Most recently, when Naga Munchetty was fired for saying,
Every time I have been told, as a woman of colour, to go home, go back to where I came from, that was embedded in racism. Now, I'm not accusing anyone of anything here, but there is, what certain phrases mean.
And this was in response to Donald Trump telling 4 female politicians to go back to where they came from. After initially holding a complaint against her, they responded to backlash, saying that the BBC is not impartial on racism. Racism is not an opinion and it is not a matter for debate. Racism is racism. There are certain topics that are impossible to be impartial on, such as racism, homophobia, sexism, etc. And one of the biggest reasons to why people are calling for the BBC to be defunded is that they believe the BBC is no longer impartial, which at first I thought was a valid criticism until I looked at their tweets. And some of their tweets really angered me, especially ones in response to an article about how BBC's Children in Need is matching Stormzy's £10 million donation to make the British media more accessible to black people, which is definitely an industry that needs more diversity, especially in higher up positions. And I think the best way to show the response to this is just to read out some of their tweets. The BBC deliberately and antagonistically being positively racist. Children in Need is, in fact, children who are in need. There is no mention in that statement of any religion, race, creed or colour. No more donations from us now. #defund the BBC. Truly sickening. BBC Children in Need has announced they will be developing a new funding programme specifically to support young black talent to achieve their full potential. Not poor, disadvantaged, marginalised white children with dreams. As if black children don't have dreams. The BBC have gone beyond the pale. It is obsessed with diversity. It is increasingly hostile to elderly people and white people generally. It is an institution that despises Britain. #defund the BBC, decriminalise non-payment of the licence theft. Why do they need special treatment? What makes them significantly different from white people, other than the political posturing of the middle-class left, which includes most, if not all, of the BBC? #defund the BBC. It's clear that the pathetic BBC News have a team of limp-wristed liberal white teenage race baiters brainstorming how to come up with stories that create division and stir racial hatred. Defund the BBC now. #defund the BBC. Basically, we have to reach a point where BBC activists are ashamed to say they work for this globalist, anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-freedom hate-monger. So shame on them all day, every day, #defund the BBC. Every time I switch on the news, there is a black person reading the news, i.e. Sky, BBC, etc. Are we being phased out? Starting to wonder. But don't worry, she clarifies. So to clarify, no racism implied in this tweet before you all start. I believe it should be equal. I also believe it should be equal. There seems to be a thing, was if it is all white people being newsreaders, that is seen as hiring people best for the job. However, when there is all black people reading the news, that's seen as pandering to diversity. This, to me, basically implies that you think that white people are inherently better than reading the news than black people. Now, this one is a bit confusing. One thing I've noticed since cancelling is that I love not having to listen to adverts as well as depressing news media. A real plus. BBC don't get adverts, so I don't quite know what they mean by this. A frequent complaint on Twitter is that the type of news stories the BBC tells and the perceived ideology behind them. One of the most recent ones that I saw on Twitter was a BBC article about a Metropolitan Police officer being suspended after video footage emerged of him kneeling on somebody's neck. The Defund the BBC activists perceived this as anti-white and race baiting because the police officer was white and the person being arrested was black, and they accused the BBC of pushing an ideology by deciding to report on the story. There is this thing used in news called gatekeeping, which is the process of deciding what stories are newsworthy and which stories are not. This criteria includes containing good pictures or videos, containing short dramatic occurrences that can be sensationalised, having novelty value, open to simple reporting, occurring on a grand scale, negative or containing violence, crime, confrontation or catastrophe, highly unexpected or contain things that one would not expect to happen, have meaning and relevance to the audience, similar events already in the news, contain elite people or nations, or they allow an event to be reported in personal or human interest terms. So as you can see, this event meets most of the requirements to be considered newsworthy. Also, when you read the article, the BBC never actually says the police officer was racist or anything like that. It says he has been suspended for his actions. And the reason that this news story was reported on is because very similar things are happening in America. Disgusting reporting here, directed at the officer when the criminal was dangerous and carrying a knife. Also, why has the BBC mentioned the man is black? Race baiting perhaps? Hashtag defund the BBC, hashtag cancel your TV licence. It doesn't matter whether the person was a criminal or not. Kneeling on someone's neck is not allowed by the police department. And why has the BBC mentioned the man is black? Because this is happening a lot to black people in America, and it's just showing it's also happening here. Another complaint that these people have is that not paying the licence fee is actually criminalised, and people can get sentenced to prison if they don't pay it and still use it. Now, this I agree with. It should be decriminalised, and it is actually something the government is considering changing. It is ridiculous that people can go to prison for not paying a licence fee, and it does negatively affect the working class people more than anything else. But if you think about it, unless something is paid by the government or through taxes or advertising, then you can't really expect to use a product or service for free. This is why in other countries the licence fee is paid through tax. Another thing that they don't like is the removal of the free licence for people over 75, which again, I don't agree with. But they seem to be blaming the BBC entirely, and they definitely were responsible for it originally being removed. But this decision was supposed to be overturned. However, it was the Tory government, not the BBC, that backtracked on this. Yet they are putting all the blame on the BBC. This just seems like a way to pass the blame from the Tory government they support onto the BBC, which they don't like. So someone said, come on guys, let's get this tweet out there, let's circulate it, get the message out and give it maximum exposure. It is up to us to look after, support and care for our elders. It's the least we can do for them. They cared for and looked up to us when we were growing up. And someone replied to this saying, get this message out too. The UK has the worst state pension in the developed world. Even the £3 a week needed to cover the TV licence wouldn't fix that. Hashtag defund the BBC is a smokescreen to cover up for not giving pensioners enough money to live off. Exactly. I completely agree with this. You can't blame the BBC for the Tory government's failures. So overall, I do really like the BBC. I like the fact that there's no advertisements or ad breaks, so I can watch a programme seamlessly. And the programmes the BBC creates are very high quality and a massive variety of different shows. And they do mostly have that educational aspect within the show. I can definitely understand the frustration if you don't want to watch the BBC, yet still have to pay the licence fee which funds the BBC. And they do have some valid points about impartiality, but it is overshadowed by the frankly hateful tweets that a lot of these defund the BBC activists send. So let me know what you think down in the comments, whether you agree with what I've said or whether you think the BBC should be defunded. But yeah, like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more.